My name is Janet, and this is the story of how I destroyed the life of my psychotic neighbor, who tried to steal everything that mattered to me. It all started 2 years ago when Victoria Chin moved into the house next door. From the moment she arrived, I knew something was off about her, but I could never have imagined just how dangerous and manipulative she would turn out to be. Victoria appeared to be the perfect neighbor at first. She was in her early 30s, impeccably dressed, and always had a bright smile and friendly wave whenever we crossed paths. She worked in marketing for a tech company and seemed to have her life completely together. Her house was always pristine. Her garden was magazine-worthy, and she drove a sleek black BMW that she washed every weekend. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband Tom and our 8-year-old daughter Emma. Tom worked as an architect at a prestigious firm downtown, and I was a freelance graphic designer who worked from my home office. We had lived in our house for 6 years and had great relationships with all our neighbors, until Victoria arrived. The first red flag should have been how quickly she tried to insert herself into our lives. Within a week of moving in, she was bringing over homemade cookies, asking about local restaurants, and finding excuses to chat whenever we were outside. At first, I thought she was just being friendly and trying to settle into the neighborhood. But then the questions started getting more personal and invasive. Victoria would ask about Tom's work, wanting to know exactly which firm he worked for, and what kinds of projects he was handling. She asked about my clients, my rates, and how I had built my business. She wanted to know about Emma's school, her extracurricular activities, and even her favorite foods and hobbies. I attributed her curiosity to genuine interest in getting to know her new neighbors, so I answered her questions openly. I even invited her over for dinner a few times, thinking it would be nice to help her feel welcome in the neighborhood. That was my first mistake. During those dinners, Victoria was like a sponge, absorbing every detail about our lives, our routines, our friends, and our family. She asked to see Tom's portfolio of architectural work, complimented my design projects, and even offered to help Emma with her homework. She seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of our extended family. Tom was initially charmed by Victoria's attention and friendliness. He enjoyed having someone who appreciated his work and asked intelligent questions about architecture. Emma liked Victoria too, especially when she started bringing over expensive toys and treats. But I began to notice small things that made me uncomfortable. Victoria would linger a little too long when Tom was explaining his projects. She would find excuses to touch his arm or stand closer to him than necessary. She started dressing more provocatively when she knew Tom would be home, wearing low-cut tops and short skirts while gardening or checking her mail. When I mentioned my concerns to Tom, he brushed them off, saying I was being paranoid, and that Victoria was just being neighborly. He said I should be grateful to have such a friendly neighbor, who was making an effort to fit into the community. I tried to ignore my growing unease, but Victoria's behavior became increasingly strange and intrusive. She started showing up at our door at odd hours with flimsy excuses. She needed to borrow sugar, she wanted to return a dish, she heard a strange noise and wanted to make sure we were okay. Then I started noticing her watching our house from her windows. I would catch glimpses of her standing behind her curtains, staring at our driveway, our front yard, or our living room windows. When I waved, she would quickly disappear, pretending she had not been watching. The situation escalated when Victoria started copying everything about my life in increasingly obvious ways. First, she got the same haircut and color as me. Then she started wearing similar clothes, and even bought the same car in the same color. She redecorated her house to match our style, and planted the same flowers in her garden. But the copying went beyond surface-level mimicry. Victoria somehow found out who I did business with and started contacting my clients, claiming she was a more experienced designer who could do better work for lower rates. She actually managed to steal 3 of my biggest clients by undercutting my prices and badmouthing my work. When I confronted her about this, Victoria acted completely innocent, claiming she had no idea those were my clients and that it was just a coincidence. She said she was just trying to build her own side business and had not meant to step on anyone's toes. But I knew it was no coincidence. Victoria had deliberately targeted my clients as part of some twisted plan to take over my life. The final straw came when I discovered that Victoria had been using my personal information to open credit cards, and take out loans in my name. She had somehow gotten hold of my social security number, date of birth, and other personal details that she was using to steal my identity. I only found out when I was denied for a credit card and discovered that my credit score had plummeted due to several accounts that I had never opened. When I investigated further, I found that someone had been using my information to rack up thousands of dollars in debt. The paper trail led directly back to Victoria. She had been using my stolen identity to fund her lifestyle, her house renovations, and even her attempts to steal my clients by offering unrealistically low prices. But identity theft was not enough for Victoria. She wanted everything I had, including my husband. I started noticing that Victoria would always seem to be outside whenever Tom came home from work. She would find excuses to talk to him, asking for help with heavy packages, or inviting him over to look at some repair work she needed done. She started wearing increasingly revealing outfits during these encounters, and would lean in close to him while they talked. Tom insisted that Victoria was just being friendly, and that I was being jealous and paranoid. He said she was a nice woman who was just trying to be a good neighbor, and that I should stop being so suspicious of everyone. But then I found the text messages. Victoria had somehow gotten Tom's phone number, and had been sending him flirty messages, photos of herself in various states of undress, and invitations to come over when I was not home. The messages were disgusting and inappropriate, and they made it clear that Victoria was actively trying to seduce my husband. When I showed Tom the messages, he was shocked and claimed he had never responded to any of them. He said he had been deleting them without reading them because he thought they were spam. But I could see in his eyes that he had been flattered by the attention, even if he had not acted on it. That night, I made a decision. Victoria had stolen my identity, sabotaged my business, and was now trying to steal my husband. She had systematically tried to destroy everything that mattered to me, and I was not going to let her get away with it. It was time for war. I started by documenting everything. I took screenshots of the text messages Victoria had sent to Tom. I gathered all the evidence of the identity theft, including credit reports, fraudulent accounts, and transaction records. I compiled a list of the clients she had stolen from me, and the lies she had told them about my work. But I knew that simply reporting her crimes would not be enough. Victoria was smart and manipulative, and she would probably find a way to worm out of any legal consequences. I needed to destroy her reputation and expose her for the psychotic predator she really was. I decided to use Victoria's own tactics against her. If she wanted to play dirty and manipulative games, I would show her how it was really done. My first move was to start gathering information about Victoria's life and background. I hired a private investigator to dig into her past and find out who she really was. What I discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Victoria Chun was not even her real name. Her real name was Victoria Martinez, and she had a long history of stalking, identity theft, and fraud. She had been arrested twice in other states for similar crimes, but had managed to avoid serious jail time by pleading down to lesser charges and paying restitution. The pattern was always the same. Victoria would move into a new neighborhood, target a family that had everything she wanted, and then systematically try to take over their lives. She had done this at least 4 times before moving next door to us. In California, she had stalked a family for 2 years, stealing the wife's identity and trying to seduce the husband. When the family finally got a restraining order against her, she moved to Arizona and did the same thing to another family. In Arizona, she had actually succeeded in breaking up a marriage by manipulating the husband into having an affair with her. But when the husband divorced his wife and wanted to be with Victoria permanently, she lost interest and moved on to her next victims. Victoria was not just a neighbor from hell. She was a serial predator who targeted happy families and destroyed them for sport. Armed with this information, I began planning my revenge. I was going to expose Victoria for exactly what she was, and make sure she could never hurt another family again. My first step was to set up a trap. I started leaving fake documents and information around my house where Victoria could find them during her snooping sessions. I created a fake business proposal for a huge contract that would supposedly be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I left financial documents that made it look like Tom and I were much wealthier than we actually were. I also started dropping hints about a fictional vacation home we were supposedly buying and a major investment opportunity that was going to make us rich. I made sure Victoria overheard phone calls about these fake opportunities and even left brochures and paperwork where she could see them. The goal was to make Victoria think that we had access to much more money and opportunities than she had realized. I wanted her to become so obsessed with stealing our lives that she would make increasingly desperate and obvious moves. It worked perfectly. Victoria immediately started trying to insert herself into these fake opportunities. She began asking Tom about investment strategies and hinting that she had money to invest if he knew of any good deals. She started researching the fake vacation home location and even drove out there to scout properties. Most importantly, she started taking bigger risks with the identity theft, opening more accounts and making larger purchases using my information. She was getting sloppy and greedy, which was exactly what I needed. While Victoria was taking the bait, I was building my case against her with the help of my private investigator and a lawyer who specialized in identity theft cases. We were documenting every fraudulent transaction, every stolen piece of information, and every illegal activity Victoria was engaging in. But I was not just building a legal case. I was also preparing to destroy her socially and professionally. I started by creating fake social media accounts and joining local community groups where I began sharing, anonymous, concerns about a new neighbor who was acting strangely and asking invasive questions about families in the area. I never mentioned Victoria by name, but I provided enough details that anyone who knew her would recognize the behavior. I also started reaching out to Victoria's coworkers, clients, and professional contacts. I posed as a concerned business partner who had discovered some troubling information about Victoria's business practices and wanted to warn others in the industry. I shared carefully selected pieces of evidence about Victoria's history of fraud and identity theft, always framing it as a concern for the community rather than a personal attack. I made sure to only share information that was publicly available or that I had obtained legally. The response was immediate and devastating. Victoria's employer launched an internal investigation after receiving multiple reports about her questionable background and potential criminal activity. Her clients started asking uncomfortable questions about her business practices and whether they could trust her with their confidential information. The neighborhood started buzzing with gossip about the strange new neighbor who was reportedly stalking families and asking inappropriate questions about their personal lives. But I was not done yet. I had saved the best for last. I arranged for Tom to be out of town on a business trip and for Emma to spend the weekend at her grandmother's house. Then I set up surveillance cameras around my property and waited for Victoria to make her move. Just as I had predicted, Victoria saw the empty house as an opportunity. She used her knowledge of our routines and her stolen copy of our house key to break into our home while we were supposedly away. I was actually hiding in my office, watching through the security cameras as Victoria crept through my house, going through my personal belongings and looking for more information to steal. But this time, she was not just looking for financial information or personal details. Victoria was planting evidence to frame me for crimes I had not committed. I watched in horror as she planted drugs in my bedroom, fake financial documents in Tom's office, and even placed a hidden camera in Emma's room. She was setting up an elaborate frame job that would have destroyed my family and possibly sent me to prison. That was when I knew that Victoria was not just a thief or a stalker. She was genuinely dangerous and needed to be stopped permanently. I waited until Victoria had finished planting her evidence and was preparing to leave. Then I called the police and reported a break-in in progress, providing them with live footage from my security cameras showing Victoria inside my house. The police arrived within minutes and caught Victoria red-handed with stolen items, planted evidence, and burglary tools. She tried to claim that I had invited her over, and that this was all a misunderstanding, but the security footage clearly showed her breaking in and planting evidence. When the police searched Victoria's house with a warrant, they found mountains of evidence of her crimes. Boxes of documents with my personal information, fraudulent credit cards and identification, photos of Tom and Emma taken without permission, and detailed notes about our family's routines and habits. They also found evidence of Victoria's previous crimes in other states, including fake identities, forged documents, and information about other families she had stalked and targeted. But the most damning evidence was Victoria's diary, where she had written in detail about her plans to destroy my family and take over my life. She had documented every step of her scheme, including her plans to frame me for drug possession and child endangerment, so that Tom would leave me and Emma would be taken away by child services. Victoria's plan was to swoop in as the supportive neighbor who would help Tom through his difficult divorce and eventually become Emma's new mother. She had mapped out our entire destruction and her subsequent takeover of our lives. Reading those diary entries made me sick to my stomach, but they also filled me with a sense of vindication. I had been right to trust my instincts about Victoria, and I had been right to fight back against her before she could destroy my family. Victoria was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including identity theft, fraud, burglary, stalking, and attempted evidence tampering. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her history of similar crimes in other states meant that she was looking at serious prison time. But I was not satisfied with just seeing Victoria arrested. I wanted to make sure that everyone who had ever been fooled by her charm and manipulation knew exactly what kind of person she really was. I compiled all of the evidence of Victoria's crimes and her history of targeting families into a comprehensive report that I shared with every relevant person and organization. Her employer, her clients, her professional associations, and even her own family received detailed documentation of her criminal behavior. I also shared the information with the local media, who were fascinated by the story of the serial identity thief who had been targeting suburban families. The story made headlines in our local newspaper, and even got picked up by some national news outlets. Victoria's mugshot and criminal history were suddenly everywhere, along with warnings about her methods and the dangers of seemingly friendly neighbors who asked too many personal questions. The social media posts I had made anonymously suddenly made perfect sense to everyone in the community, and people started coming forward with their own stories about Victoria's inappropriate behavior and invasive questions. Victoria's reputation was completely destroyed. Her employer fired her immediately, her clients canceled their contracts, and she was banned from several professional organizations. The landlord of her house evicted her for criminal activity, and she was forced to move back in with her parents in another state. But the legal consequences were even more severe. Victoria was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 8 years in prison. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to me and her other victims, though she had no assets left to pay with since she had spent all her stolen money on her fake lifestyle. The conviction also meant that Victoria would be a registered felon when she got out of prison, making it nearly impossible for her to find decent employment or housing. Her ability to target new families would be severely limited by her criminal record and the publicity surrounding her case. As for me and my family, we recovered completely from Victoria's attacks. The credit companies removed all of the fraudulent accounts from my record, and my credit score returned to normal. The clients that Victoria had stolen came back to me after learning about her criminal history and the lies she had told them. Tom was horrified when he learned the full extent of Victoria's plan and realized how close she had come to destroying our family. He apologized profusely for not taking my concerns seriously and promised to always trust my instincts about people in the future. Emma was too young to understand most of what had happened, but we made sure she knew that Victoria was a bad person who had tried to hurt our family, and that she should always tell us if anyone ever made her feel uncomfortable or asked inappropriate questions. The whole experience brought our family closer together and made us more aware of the importance of protecting our personal information and trusting our instincts about people who seem too good to be true. We also installed a comprehensive security system around our property and were much more careful about who we let into our lives and our home. The house next door remained empty for several months after Victoria's arrest, which was fine with us. We were in no hurry to have new neighbors after what we had been through. When someone finally did move in, it was a lovely elderly couple who kept to themselves and never asked invasive questions about our personal lives. They were exactly the kind of neighbors we wanted, friendly but respectful of boundaries. Looking back on the whole experience, I am proud of how I handled Victoria's attacks on my family. I could have simply reported her crimes and hoped the legal system would take care of everything. But I knew that would not be enough to stop someone as manipulative and determined as Victoria. By using her own tactics against her and systematically exposing her for what she really was, I was able to ensure that she would never be able to hurt another family the way she tried to hurt mine. Victoria had counted on her victims being too trusting, too polite, or too intimidated to fight back effectively. She had gotten away with her crimes for years because her previous victims had not been willing or able to expose her fully. But she had picked the wrong family to target this time. I was not going to be a passive victim, and I was not going to let her destroy everything I had worked to build. The revenge I got against Victoria was not just personal satisfaction. It was justice for every family she had hurt before us and protection for every family she might have hurt in the future. Sometimes the most important thing you can do when someone tries to destroy your life is to fight back with everything you have. Not just to protect yourself, but to protect everyone else who might become their next victim. Victoria thought she was smart and manipulative enough to take over my life without consequences. She thought she could steal my identity, sabotage my business, and break up my marriage while maintaining her facade of being the perfect neighbor. She was wrong. The truth always comes to light eventually, and sometimes it needs a little help getting there. I was more than happy to provide that help, and I have no regrets about the methods I used to expose Victoria for the dangerous predator she really was. In the end, Victoria got exactly what she deserved: complete destruction of the fake life she had built and serious consequences for all the lives she had tried to destroy. And I got exactly what I wanted: my family safe, my reputation restored, and the satisfaction of knowing that Victoria would never be able to hurt anyone else the way she tried to hurt us. The best part about my revenge against Victoria was that I did not have to lie, cheat, or break any laws to destroy her. I simply used the truth about who she really was, and made sure that everyone who needed to know had access to that information. Victoria had built her entire scheme on lies and deception, so exposing the truth was the most effective weapon I could use against her. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply letting people see someone's true character without any filters or facades to hide behind. Victoria had spent years perfecting her act as the perfect neighbor and the helpful friend, but underneath that act was a dangerous criminal who had no empathy for the family she destroyed. When I stripped away her act and showed everyone who she really was, Victoria had no defense and no way to recover. Her true nature was so shocking and repulsive that no amount of charm or manipulation could overcome it. That is the power of truth-based revenge. It is permanent, it is justified, and it serves a greater purpose beyond just personal satisfaction. Victoria is now serving her prison sentence and will be a registered felon for the rest of her life. Her name is permanently associated with identity theft, stalking, and fraud, making it nearly impossible for her to rebuild her criminal career when she gets out. More importantly, her case has been used as an example in law enforcement training and community awareness programs about the dangers of identity theft and neighbor stalking. Her story is helping to protect other families from similar predators. As for me, I have become something of an expert on protecting personal information and recognizing the warning signs of stalking and identity theft. I have spoken at community events and even consulted with law enforcement agencies about these issues. My experience with Victoria taught me that sometimes the people who seem the most trustworthy and helpful are actually the most dangerous. They use our natural inclination to be friendly and trusting against us, gathering information and access that they then use to destroy our lives. But it also taught me that ordinary people have more power than they realize to fight back against these predators. You do not have to be a victim if you are willing to document evidence, seek help from professionals, and use every legal tool available to expose the truth. The key is to never underestimate someone who is trying to destroy your life, and never hesitate to use their own methods against them when necessary. Victoria underestimated me, and that was her biggest mistake. She thought I was just another trusting suburban mom who would be too polite and naive to fight back effectively. She could not have been more wrong. I was polite right up until the moment she crossed the line and threatened my family. After that, I was ruthless, strategic, and completely committed to destroying her before she could destroy us. And in the end, that made all the difference. Victoria is now exactly where she belongs, behind bars, with her reputation in ruins and her ability to hurt other families permanently damaged. Meanwhile, my family is stronger than ever, my business is thriving, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that I protected not just my own family, but potentially dozens of other families who might have been Victoria's future victims. That is what real justice looks like, and that is what makes revenge worth it when it is done for the right reasons. Victoria tried to steal my life, but instead, she gave me something much more valuable. The knowledge that I am strong enough to fight back against anyone who tries to hurt the people I love. And that is a lesson I will never forget. If you enjoyed this story of neighbor revenge, and want to see more tales of toxic people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe to Revenge Janet. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, so you never miss a story about manipulative neighbors, identity thieves, and other predators getting their comeuppance. Share this video with anyone who has ever dealt with a neighbor from hell, and let me know in the comments what kind of revenge story you would like to hear next. Remember, at Revenge Janet, we believe that the truth is the most powerful weapon against people who try to destroy innocent families. Until next time, trust your instincts, protect your personal information, and never be afraid to fight back against those who threaten everything you hold dear.